one right to the text, but since I see new faces, I'm wondering, of the people that are new or people that have been here before, would you like to spend a couple of Friday nights reviewing and going over that, or everybody feel okay with it? So now's your time to respond. You can't just shake your head because I don't know. You want to go over it again, review it? You want to just move on? Everybody familiar with it?
Let's review.
What's that?
Let's review.
Let's start it over again? Okay. Anybody else want to refresh or start over from the beginning, get some basics? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so what I will do then is the next 3 Fridays in a row, I will just spend about 10 minutes at the beginning of class going over the actual physical component of this. The second class will go over the breathing dimension of this, which is very important. And the third class will go over, probably the most important, is what do you do with your mind? Of course, I'm sure that wasn't a problem tonight as you all sat and I rang the bell, you went, oh my gosh, where am I? What was that? I was in total blissed out samadhi. I didn't hear the high school football band or the none of that. It just completely floated through in one ear and out the other.
What band?
Yeah. And some people thought the band was actually their own consciousness manifesting, and there wasn't a band outside at all. There wasn't a band, by the way, so if you heard a band, you were listening to your own mind and its madness. Well, whatever. This is good to do because it's very essential or fundamental, this practice. It hasn't changed in millennia. The basics have remained the same. All I do is pass on what I've been taught by my teachers, and all they did was pass on what they were taught by their teachers. And if you look at the text, it confirms the solid essentials of the meditation practice. It also confirms that the only reason to do the meditation practice at all is because we've lost touch with our minds, with our consciousness. For whatever many complicated reasons, that ground, that terrain, the mind ground it's called, is covered in weeds. It's neglected. It is not clear and present to us, which it should be. This is what it means to be human, is to have access directly to the full capacity of our mind. What Buddhism talks about is mind or consciousness. But it becomes clear, even in the 45 minutes sitting here tonight, that we're in and out of awareness of what our body's going through, what our emotions are, what our thoughts and feelings are. There's just a swirl going around all the time. And parsing that, figuring what that is, where it's coming from, what its nature is, how it's directing and moving us along in our choices, decisions, relationships, our joys and sorrows and so forth, is really at the heart of what this practice is to get access to the understandings and workings of our own mind. Not the mind, but our own mind. And so the ancients would say that the only reason we have meditation is because we're so distracted, we're so scattered. We have to bring in an artificial mechanism, a device, that brings our body, our mind, our emotions into a focused concentration, into a, if you will, a kind of still awareness. And I use that, not just stillness, and not just awareness, but a still awareness, a calm insight into what's happening, thought to thought, feeling to feeling. And as we get access to that, then this unfamiliar turf, this terra incognita, becomes more and more familiar to us, and in a sense, probably becomes the core of our lives in many ways. It becomes a room that we go to really take stock of ourselves, our lives, and so forth. And once you learn the basics, you can practice this on your own. And if you do it daily, you will find you're going to get deeper and deeper access to those layers of consciousness that are either unavailable right now, or covered over, or as seen through a glass darkly, however you want to, or in a fog. They're there, they're operating, they're functioning, but we're just not cognizant of them because our attention, our ability to focus and tune into that is muddled, it's confused, it's out of shape. So in a sense, this place is a gymnasium of sorts where you take up these ancient methodologies for getting in shape to understand the workings of our own minds and natures. That's basically what it's about. So that's why we go through the basics first through Fridays, and then we stay text-based because the texts are sort of the repository of the teachings that have addressed this throughout time. And so by going to those, we get a direct contact to the ancient teachings and the teachers that pass this along from generation to generation. How many people here read Chinese directly? Does that mean you kind of read it, or you really read it, or just about 5 or 6? Is that it? Everybody being polite? So, was your hand up, or are you taking a picture? Oh, okay. So those of you who follow it directly will be interested when we put the Chinese up to look at what's there. But most of you are not going to be Chinese literate, and this is not a problem because we have a pretty good group that works with the translation, and we're polishing the English, so you'll be able to come at it directly through the English. So what I thought I'd do tonight, normally I don't do this. Just for tonight, I'm going to do it because we're summarizing. I'm going to pull my version so I don't have to twist my neck around and look at the text. And we're just going to go through where we got from spring, okay? So in other words, last spring, we went through a body of text. We haven't polished it yet. We'll look at what Han Chan's been saying. And you have any questions, ask your questions as we go along. Most of this we've covered in detail for the class, so those of you who are new, basically it's just a summary to see where he's going and what he's leading to. Anybody want to summarize the first part that we're not going to see tonight? Anybody remember it? That would be a challenge. And we don't want challenges. So, could you toss me that pillow? I'm going to put this up a little higher. Okay. So basically what he's doing is this official writes him and says, tell me about the basics of cultivation. He begins a response, and his response essentially goes right to the heart of practice. He goes right to the heart with practice, but infused in this is the theory behind it. So, if we start at the beginning, here for spring, we're about how far through the text? Anybody want to say? You're a good, you crunch some of the numbers. Where are we, Suzanne?
About half.
About half? So we should finish up this text. Finish the line.
By
Well, I'd hope a little sooner. I'm notoriously inconstant and slow, and so you'll notice that people are saying next year, even though we could do it next week. But we're not going fast, and the reason we're not going fast is because we're finding in the translation there's a lot of subtlety and nuance here. And there's a lot of terms and phrases and ideas that are new to all of us. It's always the case when translating this material, there aren't ready equivalents in Western philosophical or even spiritual thought. And where those equivalents aren't readily available, rather than just reach and grab something and plug it in, we pause. And sometimes we pause and say, there isn't anything quite like this. And we leave it at that. So if you like things black and white and very clear, this is not the place. Just because of the nature of this material is very new. Any event, we put in pinyin romanization. That's below the characters. These are classical. These are not the modified Chinese. And then you'll see our format. Are we on last week's there? So okay, so I've got the same thing. We've got a section of text of Chinese characters. And then you see what we've done. We've kind of done a literal rendering in that mix there where there's characters and then rough translations, and then we start. So we're going to go pretty quickly here, but please, if I'm looking down and reading this with you, if you have any questions on this, even though we've been through it, ask. It's practice, it's self-cultivation. This is not simply an intellectual grasp of some teaching or philosophy, but it is a deep transformation of your whole being. So as you study, you practice, and that then helps make the study make sense. The study informs the practice, but the practice then in turn illuminates the study, and there's this reciprocal thing going on. But he says, you know, if you don't practice, there's nothing going on, because this is talking about a total embodiment. So when you take up the practice, you have to have firm belief in it, and you have to depend on it unwaveringly and steadfastly hold to it. So he's making out three things here. There has to be faith, but again, it's a hypothetical faith that you start with. If you don't have any faith to begin with in the practice, you're not going to take it up. But it is not that faith is the end here. Faith is a means to the end. So he says, just take it up, believe that you have a right methodology. Depend for me. I should try a different kind and so on and so forth. And so you hop from one thing to another, never penetrating. So in this sense, he's saying, this will only impede you. Stick with it. It goes on. At the outset, I want to make this clear, so when a situation arises, you will not have doubts or misgivings. You will not be impervious to external states unless you gain some skill in your practice. So now he's saying, unless you have the method, unless you're applying it, situations will arise, and when the situation arises, for you to keep going through it, not to have a second thoughts about it or doubts or misgivings, you have to understand and hold to it really firmly at that point, because your tendency will be to drop it then. And he says, I want to tell you at the outset, you will not be impervious to these states until you gain some skill with this. Anybody get a feel for what this is referring to? Doubt is one. What he's talking about is when you begin even the spiritual practice of saying, I want to cultivate my spirituality somehow. As soon as you make that resolve, resistance will arise, doubts will arise at a very superficial level. You know, you want to go to this retreat or something, you maybe not. You know, and you pull back, but then you want to go again, and you pull back, there's this back and forth. Because, and this is not just within Buddhism, there's a famous Christian poem called The Hound of Heaven. And it describes this process of once you make the resolve to go in this direction, the accumulated habits that you have, piled on that resist this grounding, this recentering, are very powerful, psychologically, emotionally, physically, and they will tug at you at this point. So at this point, you have to sort of plug in and be somewhat resolute. So he means also, though, if you decide to take up, like the meditation practice in a very serious way, and you decide to do a whole week of it, what's called a session, a meditation retreat, say 7 days or 14 days, and you really then bring your concentration and effort to bear, then even more so because you're making such accelerated approach, these kinds of states can arise even quicker, even more intensely. And they can be, you mentioned one, doubt. Doubt about
whether or not this is the right thing for you to be doing, whether or not it can work.
okay. First thing, whether it can work, whether it's the right thing to be doing,
Whether or not it's you're right for it or it's
whether
right
you're
for
right for it. Yeah, we can, layers. Anybody else? Doubts. Just the level of doubt. It's a waste of time. I'm sitting here doing nothing.
My karma's too heavy.
Oh, that's a good one. The doubt is, I doubt that I can do it. Other people can do it, but I can't do it because I'm uniquely covered with heavy karma. I started with the doubt, I can't do it because I'm not Asian. I mean, some of them are really silly, and some of them aren't so silly.
Can't cross my legs.
I can't cross my legs. And therefore, in the text it says, if you can't cross your legs, you can't know yourself. No, it's not there, but we think that's, crossing the legs is the essential, right? Sometimes you have a really strong resolve until the third or fourth day. And then a very insidious doubt will come in of, you can't calm your mind. It's impossible. Your mind is a monkey house, and you'll never get a handle on it. Give up. Well, because you're going to just be frustrated. And at that point, it increases. So there's doubt, there's fear, there's anxiety. There's also a kind of spiritual lust that can happen, where you really, really are thirsting for some awakening experience. And so you start to get into a state, which is, he's saying, you won't be impervious to this, of you sat and you had 10 minutes where it was really pretty blissful. Like the pain stopped, your mind was really calm, you felt light and whatnot. And then you say, I almost had it. It was there and I almost had it. And now you want to get it back. And so then you start getting into this frenetic search for the tail of this thing that you almost have because you want to now embrace it. And you go down that road. So there's another kind of anxiety. Not anxiety about what let behind. I left my friends or my job for a week. Or I left, what? What do you leave behind when you go on a retreat? Your cell phones, your iPads, you left all those behind. A little anxiety kicks in at that point.
My kitchen.
I left my kitchen behind. I left my diary behind. I left texting behind. I left my house behind. I left my snack bar behind. I left my drugs behind. Whatever it is. You go that, but also there's the anxiety about what you want. Not only what you're leaving behind, but what you're longing for. That creates anxiety too. I only have 1 week to do this. I've taken off of work. I better get enlightened in 7 days or else. Okay? So he's saying, unless you gain some skill, you won't be able to deal with these. He goes on. Fan now, these afflictions, klesha in Sanskrit, then flood your mind seemingly from nowhere. Suddenly lust or craving surges and you become despondent and moody. Or all manner of hindrances assail you, so much so that your mind is exhausted, your strength depleted, and you feel helpless. This doesn't have to happen. Okay, I'm not trying to plant a seed. You're saying, wow, that hasn't happened to me yet. I don't think I'm making any progress. Like the person goes to the therapist and says, unlike other people, I don't have a lot of anxiety or worry. And the shrink is taking on the note, and he says, should I be worried about that? Okay, so if it doesn't come in already, don't invite it. Don't think that this has to happen, but it could happen. Goes on. These are the seeds, bija, of habituation stored for innumerable aeons in the eighth consciousness. Now they surface, activated, accelerated by the intensity of your cultivation. In other words, he's saying all these moods, these states, these doubts, that seem both external and internal, are nothing more than the opening up of your consciousness. And in that consciousness is stored these seeds that have accumulated in this lifetime and over lifetimes. And this is called the eighth of the storehouse consciousness. Again, this is not a separate thing like an organ in the body, but it's a functioning of the whole thing. It's called consciousness. And at the deepest level, the eighth is where in a deep, almost inaccessible storage kind of way, the deepest thoughts, feelings, emotions, habituations are lying and not easy to get at, but they will come up as you meditate. So now I'll go back a little bit to the theory. Most of our time is spent from the Buddhist point of view, it's called the sixth consciousness, the ordinary consciousness, the discerning, discriminating, busy consciousness. This is the one that's engaged 24/7, even in sleep most of the time. Okay? So, for example, if you use that consciousness, it's what your eyes and ears and nose and tongue are constantly involved with, the sights and sounds and smells. It's a very active, engaged thing. And that has become hyperinflated with the technologies that we use now to extend that consciousness. So as you Twitter, tweet, text, Facebook, blah, 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 you're doing this, you're merely just inflating that sixth consciousness activity. So it becomes, in the modern sense, way overcharged, super overcharged. If I go back, I'll give a story from Maine later, but if I go back to when I grew up on a farm, the sixth consciousness was pretty dull for most people on the farm. They're out there tilling the fields, watching the seasons, sit on the porch, listen to the whippoorwill, watch the little light bugs at night, go to bed. My uncles used to sleep with their bib overalls on, they were so tired. Wake up the next morning, milk the cows, do the same thing. There was no TV. Radio was just in one part of the house and nobody had really any time to listen to it. And so their sixth consciousness was kind of flat. It wasn't overcharged. They would go nuts dropping into Berkeley or San Francisco and just try to figure out how do you even, they would get dizzy. Their sixth senses would become dizzy by the overstimulation. Now, we don't feel dizzy. We don't feel dizzy, but we are dizzy. We don't feel dizzy because of something called hedonic habituation. And that means we adapt or we habituate to levels of stimulation and therefore feel it to be normal without realizing that we are, in fact, super hyper engaged. And so when we sit in meditation here, what happens is, and what's supposed to happen is because you're sitting like this, and the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body are, then that vibe, that hyperstimulation doesn't know where to go. And it just starts rattling around in consciousness. We feel a little anxious, we feel stimulated, overstimulated. We can't seem to get this handle on it. Whereas I can remember my grandfather just sitting on the porch, for an hour, just watching the butterflies or something like that, and we'd have a couple words of conversation. And he wasn't like he was a meditator, he wasn't. It's just that his normal consciousness was sort of attuned to nature, and he went at that pace. So if we went to the county fair, he had to recover for a week. He was just saying, my God, that was just getting ready for it. He normally didn't put on any other clothes, he had to put on other clothes to go, and he had money, and he got there with all the, county fair is not pretty simple then, but our standards. But that was a big stimulation for him. You could feel his waters going for about a week until he got back into the rhythm. So part of what we're doing here is detoxing. On a Friday night for 45 minutes, you're unplugging, and whatever you're feeling, a lot of that's just going to be the residual stuff that's built up from the overstimulation. So what he's talking about here, we're not even into the 7th or 8th level. We're just trying to get the 6th relatively calm, so then naturally your awareness will drop into the 7th and 8th as the 6th becomes more calm. And that's when it starts to get really interesting. So you can see it as layers of awareness, the 8th being the most interesting. So what happens when you're doing the meditation practice, as the 6th starts to calm and still, and you get over the anxiety and the doubts about it, it's been like 15 minutes, and blah, 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 and you just let it happen, then the deeper states of consciousness start to come up naturally. They're there, but they just don't have a chance. And then you'll start to have memories, dreams, reflections of things that have happened today, things that have happened yesterday, last week, even back to your earliest period of childhood. That's the first layer. And then it goes deeper and deeper from there. It's a very interesting kind of ground to explore, but most of us never get there. The only reason for going back there is not because it's like a cool trip and it's really fascinating. The reason we go back there is that's where all the dynamic generation of activities coming from those deeper layers. The 6th is actually responding to the movements, the habituated movements in the 7th and 8th. So unless we get to that ground, we're not in control. We don't even know why we're doing what we're doing. We're constantly in a reflexive mode rather than reflective. So that's what he's saying is when he's talking about the 8th. Nobody's got any questions? We're just rolling through this? Okay. Right here you need to have discernment. Discernment comes both from practice and from theory. First you have to recognize it for what it is and then break through it. You cannot break through it unless you recognize it. This is very important. You cannot repress in this process. Things come up, you can't repress them and think you're dealing with them. You have to see through them. Then they dissolve by themselves. Repression, I know Freud's overrated, but he did have a pretty good theory called the return of the repressed. Anybody know that one? Anybody know who Freud was? It's a new cartoon in New Yorker. Freud, Sigmund Freud. Everybody familiar with Freud?
Yeah.
What did Freud have to say? Anything? Anything interesting to us? His major thesis?
We're all driven by sexual urges.
We're all driven by desires and urges that we're not aware of. Okay? This is the underlying thing, mostly sexual. Okay? Nonetheless, he has a point, but his point was if you try to repress desires and anxieties and things that come up, you repress them, they will return. It's called the return of the repressed. In other words, they come back in other ways to bite you. In psychosomatic illnesses, your skin breaks out. You develop anxiety, you develop hypertension, and so on and so forth. It's the return of the repressed. So even by Freud's thing, repression doesn't work. The Buddha knew this a long time before Freud, but that's okay. Freud, as far as I know, did not read the Buddha. Would have been an interesting dialogue. Didn't happen. Okay, he says here, you rouse yourself, you get energized, be vigorous and brave. You pick up your meditation topic, investigation, right where these thoughts arise. Do not waver. In other words, don't be turned by it. You press on, you're steady, you're constant, and you ask yourself, what's going on here? He's saying there's nothing going on here. Because this is just arising, self-arising. It's not real, it's just the arising of this habitual confusion, and ultimately what it's about. You want to find out an answer. So he's saying at this point, you really need to go into the heart of your being and figure out what's going on here. It's not something external. It's not like a demon that's coming, or that this is some kind of state that's brought about by the people you're sitting with. But rather he's saying all you're doing is getting back to the ground. And because you haven't seen it for so long, you think it's strange and very new to you, and there's something going on here. But in fact, you're down in the boiler room. Let me give an example like that. I just saw the Japanese Spirited Away, and the little protagonist. Yeah, she goes down into the boiler room where it's all happening, right? And all of a sudden, so you see the facade, or like the Wizard of Oz. So you go to Oz. So those you don't know Spirited Away? Okay, so the bowels of the thing that make it run. If you were at some place, you go down where the engine's running, and you see what's making everything happen. On the superficial facade, it's Oz, right? But you go behind the screen, and there's the wizard moving over the bowl. So when you go into this terrain, it's like very strange for the first time because you never saw the bowels of your being. You never saw what the other sutra calls the king on the throne that's directing everything. So it's a little strange at the beginning, but as you get more familiar with this, you will be able to deal with these questions and answer them.
Hey, Marty.
Yes?
How can you, I know you can't probably answer this, but how can you discern then between the mind's distraction and what is really at the root of what's really going on in the boiler room?
I don't know if I understand completely. The first thing you deal with is whatever these states are that come up. You do not take them as seriously real entities, but rather as manifestations of the deeper ground. So by doing that, you've already diffused them. Most people, when they get to them, even though they understand the theory, a pleasant or unpleasant state arises. The unpleasant state, they freak out and think, I'm going nuts. In the pleasant state, they think, oh, I'm enlightened. Either way, he's saying is to respond, he's just responding to the surface waves. You need to go down deeper below the waves, so don't get caught up in that. And then watch, and you'll start to see patterns emerging. You'll start to see the actual origins of these seeds, where they came from. But there requires a sort of constant patience, and then a not being moved by the manifestations. So the discernment of the theory tells you everything that manifests is coming from the stirrings, the movements of this consciousness, untamed, unmanaged, in its habitual patterns. Relax. Relax. Let yourself drop into its deeper workings until you can actually see the mechanism for the anger, the fear, the desire, and so forth arising. So the discernment theoretically is hold, don't get turned, but then realize if you come back, ironically, to your concentration, you will actually go down deeper. You'll pass the distraction, so to speak.
So are you focusing on those
Then
manifestations?
what he's going to do, he's going to tell you whatever meditation topic whatever meditation topic you're using, you move away from the state, back to the meditation topic, and then the light focuses, and he says suddenly you see it, not because you willfully tried to look at it, but because you pulled your mind back from distraction, and then the light shines on it, you see it immediately as for what it is.
Nice.
But if you try to see it, what you're doing is you're engaging it, and then the clarity is gone because you're
Right.
taking it as something sort of real or serious. I need to solve this, or I need to stay away from it. And he said between the two of repressing it and chasing after it, you simply do the third, observe. And so the meditation topics allows you to observe your own mind ground. It's funny, we don't usually observe our own mind ground because we're so actively playing our part in it. We're the director, we're the actor, we're everything in it.
Or we're the analyst.
And we're the analyst. But even at the analyst, we're playing a role,
Right.
justifying whatnot. So to merely observe is what the meditation practice is helping to do. That pretty good? Clear? Okay. Maybe we won't go much further here tonight. We'll pick up on this next week. Because now he's going to go into even if you think ghosts and spirits manifest. But I think we've run through a lot of ground here. Any other questions on this? Yes.
We just were talking about like not repressing things, but still keeping your attention on the
Keeping your...
attention on the meditation topic.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't that in some sense also a form of repression, where you go back to your meditation topic and sort of leave whatever comes up out?
No. It's not repression, because repression is the act of denial of it. Whereas refocusing merely allows you to frame it again outside of either repressing or giving into it. It can seem, and you can use it this way, as a repressive technique, and some people do. Some people actually turn meditation into a continual practice of repression. And this then ends up backfiring. And the states that come from this text are pretty clear about it. So, there's a kind of dynamic tension going here. You observe it, and you're aware of it. But as soon as you find yourself being moved either way, you'll pull back to your concentration. Once your concentration stills the ground again, you can observe it again. And so he's going to describe a back and forth process of observation, analysis, but the bridge is always maintaining enough concentration that you're not turned by it, but not turning your concentration into a denial or repression of it. So this will come up later, but he's going to get very subtle about this. So it's a good question. It's a wrong application of the technique, and he'll say, if you do it that way, you will not in fact experience the markers for success in this, which have to do with equanimity, with an increased sense of joy, with a sense of calm and non-klesha. So if you use your meditation to repress it, you will become a mess. But you won't think you're a mess because you call yourself a great meditator. And sometimes people actually do this. And so what happens is they're in a state of advanced repression, masked as deep meditation. And our teacher used to test us on this all the time. He would let us sit for hours. And we'd come, oh man, I hardly want to open my eyes. Whoa, And it works as long as, you're in this insulated thing. But then he would say, oh, here's $100, go out and buy something. Or he'd say, I had a story of two of the monks had been 14 days in this and had been using that concentration technique because before they became monks, they were really interested in worldly power, wanting to be politicians. So after 14 days of this intense, and he knew that that's what they were doing with it, the desire came up for this, and they use their concentration to repress it, but they hadn't analyzed it and gone through it, but they thought they had. So then 2 tickets came in for the inaugural ball for the mayor of San Francisco. And the master says, oh, I don't go to these things, why don't you 2 go? So 14 days of 15 hours a day of meditation in this state, then he gives them 2 tickets to the inaugural ball. And so they wander out of the monastery and they go to, the Palace of Fine Arts, and there's all these women in necklaces and drop-down dresses, and all the politicians with their suits, and the band's playing, the champagne's flowing, and people are glad-handing all over the place, and they're going, And they came back, and the master said, so, how was your samadhi? In other words, did it work? And it did work because all of this just arose in them again. And then he instructed them that you can't use meditation to repress because it doesn't go away. It just sits there until it's given an opportunity, then it comes out again. So the long-term marker would be, am I getting more settled? Am I getting really a kind of equanimity that in all sorts of states doesn't go up and down and so forth? Then you know you're not using your meditation in a repressive way. So there's a check and balance here. It's not just it feels like I'm okay, but how does it manifest? What is your embodiment of it like? And then you know you probably got the balance correct. I don't know if that helps, but... Okay, I will pause here. Do you want to see the pictures or not?
Yeah.
Okay, so...
Artificial nature, at least.
What's that?
I said, I'll take some artificial nature. I didn't get enough.
Okay, so what I did at the last class, I said, everybody, we're so inundated with all this stuff. What you should do is spend some of the summer in a throwaway-like fashion, replug into nature somehow. So some people went up to Oregon and didn't want to come back, right? It got so peaceful, nature was so pleasant, they didn't want to come back. So I do a thing, I go to Maine, and I thought if you can drop those photos, I'd show you a little bit of what it's like in Maine, MySpace, and then tell you some of the stories about the people who unplugged there. These are not in any order, so please, if you douse the lights, it'll probably be clear. Okay, so just start at the top. I should have been, Hung Sure is really good at this, and he said he would help me, and then he left. But I would put them in an order. They're no order. Is that where they start? Just start at the top, wherever that is. It should be main photos.
Yeah, main photo is the folder right now, so.
Main photos all the way down.
Fourth from the bottom.
Yeah.
So where does it start?
So let us see.
Go to-
Main photos, right?
Yeah.
We are here now.
What is that one?
This is the,
Oh, okay.
Wow.
This was a mistake for me. You can reduce it. It's, yeah. Somebody told me there was a nice place to kayak. And I tried that. That's where my cell phone went dead because it was in my pocket. And when the kayak tipped, that was it for the cell phone.
What was the river?
So a blessing in disguise. Okay, keep going. There's, when you come into, okay, so this is a remote part of Maine, northwestern Maine, 20 miles from the Canadian border. Our camp is way over there in that little thing on the left. I can't point to it because it's on the corner, but when you're on the top of the land coming in, and this is, by the way, where the Appalachian Trail, it reaches its northern. So I'm standing, the Appalachian Trail is right to my left here, and it keeps going into Canada. And then this is the whole lake area. So just give you the overview. Keep going. That's my writing desk in my camp. So there's a generator, and it gets turned on maybe for a couple hours a day, and then we can charge up things, and then I can work. Keep going. This is just what you encounter when you go out. There's no television. There wasn't radio until this year, and I'll tell you the story about that. Just another view. That's my kayak paddle bottom up. So what I do is I just get in my kayak with some trail mix. You can drink the water right out of the lake, so I don't have to take water. And I just go exploring. This is one of the fjord kind of things. It goes back deeper and deeper and deeper, way back in there. This is a picture of the camp. Well, that's what they call them up there. This is our lodge or whatever. So my camp's where the towel's hanging. And then there's the big lodge there. And the girls, all the little grandchildren wanted to have this thing. For whatever reason, they were going to make a teepee, and that's as far as it got. They figured out there were weird things at night, they didn't want to sleep out. So. And there's a fire pit there that we gather with the kids and everything every night. Keep going. Just another view of the camp. We built this from scratch. This was just uninhabited. We went up, dragged everything up there and put it together. This is, you're seeing my sister's softness. She insisted that she wasn't going to have a rustic camp, so she brought in all the accoutrements. That bottom right is a 6-burner stove, but that's where we all sit, have dinner together, and then there's a porch, screened in and whatnot. She insisted on having light. View at the end of day, from where I sit on a dock. This is one of the places I just locate myself and spend the rest day after day. That mountain's about 4,000 or 5,000 feet. Keep going. Yeah. This, for those of you interested, is a writer's cabin of somebody across the lake. I just paddled over because I knew somebody was over there, a writer. And this is, you'll see 4 or 5 of these around the lake. Really nice, secluded. Writers just go there. What's her name? Rachel Carson spent some time up there at one point writing. E.B. White. It's just absolutely still.
So Barney, this is a rustic county?
Huh?
This is a rustic county? The county that you're in?
No, what county are we in? We're near Rangeley Lakes.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Okay, you know this area, okay.
Yes, I knew that.
Okay, good, well then somebody knows, keep going. I came out, I had a kind of bivouac, a storm came through, they come up unexpectedly. As it cleared, I got back in the kayak to go, but you can see the rainbow shooting across the lake there. Another view of the top, keep going. Go. This is one of the rooms, not my room, this is a guest room, so you can see, that's my niece's room. I'll tell you the stories about her. But, okay, keep going. Another room. So we can house about 25 to 30 people. Yeah. Which is fun, actually, for people. Some people really enjoy this, some people go nuts. Keep going. This is my hangout place. This is on the backside. Nobody goes over here. It's a cove by itself. This is after a rain. I can use that boat. That's a runabout kind of boat. But usually I just sit there and read. Keep going. Another view. Keep going. One of my friends. He's a little shy. First time we met, but I was out kayaking and I pulled up alongside the rock and he decided to take a seat. But the thing about this is I can spend 8, 9, 10 hours and not see another person. This is all I encounter. And after a year in Berkeley, this is pretty nice. Keep going. That's my meditation space. I broke down, I got a pillow and a cushion. So that's where I sit in the morning. You keep going. The road leading in. It's we're 45 minutes from the nearest town, which is a post office and a gas station. So this is very, very remote. Keep going. This I show you because it's the upper part of the new boathouse, and I'm thinking we might do a chant there sometime. This would easily hold 25 people sitting, and it's an A-frame on the top, very quiet. So we're just finishing that up. Keep going. So the only companions I have up there are these guys. And when I sit in the morning, you saw that place where I'm sitting, they line up outside the door. And they wait for me to stop sitting. So once I cross my legs, they put their heads down and go, boom. As soon as I uncross my legs, which I just did, their heads come up. And they're like, okay, are we ready to go and do some play now? So, keep going. That's my favorite. She just passed away. But I had her since she was a puppy, and they're water dogs. She's got webs between her feet. So we go out and spend the whole day together. She sits in the kayak with me, sort of, and we just go exploring. And she doesn't leave my side. And it's really interesting to go through nature with a dog, as opposed to just your own sensibilities, because she finds all kinds of things. Yeah.
She passed from OA?
Yeah. Yeah, she did. But I'll show you her replacement. Keep going. This one I got just because there's a battle going on between the crows and the eagles, and there was 2 baby eaglets born, and this was one of the leaders of the crows, and they had surrounded this baby eaglet, about 50 crows, and the cacophony was huge until Mama Eagle dove down into this thing and sent all the crows flying. So this is an ancient thing, but go ahead. Another view, just going out on the kayak. That's an island there that you can just go explore or camp on. Yeah. Another view. It's very, very calm. The lake is 20 miles long, so it's not a small lake. Keep going. The dock, where I spend most of my summer, is right there. Okay.
Is it hot?
No, it's the water is very swimmable. I just slide in. You don't have to wear any swimming suit because there's nobody there. I just read or just sit, and then I roll off and the water come up. It's about 75, sometimes low 80s in temperature. Very nice. A little humid sometimes, but keep going, yeah. I came down and got a shot at night. That's the kayak. I pulled it up at the end of the day, and you just see at night it's just stunning. Keep going. The island across from us. Yeah. So,
Marty, are there any motorized boats on that lake, or is it?
little bits.
Okay.
Yeah, little bits, but it's, Maine has called it unsuitable for development, which means nobody can build on it anymore. So it's very, we were the last ones on it. Just another view of my writing cabin with my reading chair. Keep going. Again, different views of sun. We get northern lights up there, so you see aurora borealis as well. Keep going. Now, so this is replacement. 3 months old, replacing the other one. And what she's figured out is she's too young to go out with me in the kayak, but she doesn't want to be left behind. And she noticed that when I went out with the kayak, the first thing I do is put those on. So while I was meditating, I heard her out there, and I came up with the camera. She was stealing them to hide them so that I couldn't go out. Yeah.
So what kind of dog is it?
This is a Chesapeake Bay
That's
retriever, yeah. Good. Okay, next. Just another shot of the kayaking. Go ahead. The clouds are just incredible. I was showing you the tree. That's where the eagles are, but you can't see the next one. Again, going down, and this is where a river comes in, so you can just go back and explore. Yeah.
Did you encounter storms on the lake?
Oh, storms come up very unexpectedly, so you always have to be watching the sky. And it can go from glass calm to hazardous. We rescued 2 women last year, a mother and her daughter, completely unaware of what they were doing. They went out to gather water at one of the springs in a canoe, and when they turned around, the way they were going into the wind, they didn't know what they were doing. The wind just pushed them against shore, and they would have died because there's no way to get cell phone. They didn't have any cell phone. They didn't have life preservers in their craft. When we got them, we were driving by in the family boat, and we saw these people waving, and I said, well, they were waving like this, not like that, so maybe we'll turn around. We turned around, and they were in shock. We pulled them up and got them to the other side of the lake where their campground is, but they wouldn't have made it through the night. Yeah, so it's really pretty, but you got to be careful. Keep going. These are the patrol. No, they're just down from my cabin, and anything that comes near, they start honking. It's like the geese of Rome. So we know when there's a coyote or a wolf or something because they'll just go, and they go all night long. Keep going. Another view of this, that mountain is one we climb usually every other year. Keep
Does it
going.
have a name?
It's a Siskahas. Yeah. Keep going. Another view. The white thing there, which people ask about, underneath there's a pipe. It goes to shore, and we pull our water off that pipe into the camp. We take, pumped up to a holding tank, and then that runs by gravity through the tank. That's how we have water. So we just take the water out of the lake. Yeah. Keep going. Yeah, just another early morning shot as the water's rising. That's a moose haven down there. That's where I met my first moose who chased me.
That's dangerous.
Yes. I learned to paddle really fast. Keep going. Another view, just a beautiful day, just setting out. Go ahead. This is where I spend most of my time, is on this back dock. It's just absolutely tranquil. You hear nothing. A bird at 100 yards, you can hear its wings flapping. You hear the...
So Dr. Bronner?
That's my Dr. Bronner shirt and my goggles. All right, there you go. Keep going. Another view of it as you come down off the back trail to find it. Yeah, keep going. Am I boring you, or is this?
No.
Okay, keep going.
So it's kind of
There, I pulled the kayak up. There's my reading chair. Now, my options for the day. Shall I go kayaking, sit here and read, or just sit here? And usually it's decided by which dog comes down. Some dogs like to read, some don't. Keep going. These are loons. Those of you who have never seen loons before. I was very lucky this year to get that close. Usually it's hard. This is a couple. It's a male and female. They have the same markings. Anybody know about loons? You ever hear a loon cry?
Yeah.
They're ancient birds, and their cries are just haunting, eerie cries. They're actually not birds, technically, because they have solid bones and not hollow ones, and they weigh a lot. And that's why they're called loons, because when they get on land, they walk clumsily, and loon means awkward in Scandinavian. So these are just two. They're smaller than a goose, but bigger than a duck. And I just happened upon this pair. They usually, if they're babies, sit on their backs and ride around on their backs.
That's incredible formats.
Yeah, that one came out pretty good. I was happy with that.
If they're not birds, what are they?
Well, their nearest living relative, penguins.
Oh.
Yeah, their nearest living relative, and they take forever to take off because they're so heavy. So they use their feet and their wings, and they go running. In Maine, they'll mistake a highway at night where it's been rainy, black as a river, and they'll come down, and that's it. They'll never get up again because they can't take off on land. It's not all Disney-like. They take wolves and coyote down. They'll tease a coyote to come in the water, and they'll get close enough, and then they'll keep backing up, but the coyote's way out in the deep. And then they go underneath, and that little cute beak you see turns into a dart. And they can turbo. They take water in their mouths and out their back, and they turbo underneath and come up and hit the belly side of that coyote. Right. I heard this story from the old camper up there. I was on the lake swimming, of course, au naturel. And one of these loons came up about 25 yards away, and I thought, oh, I'll get it. And then I thought, wait a minute. I quickly got out of the water. Didn't go on. Next one. Yeah, this is just getting a single shot. The red eyes are just stunning, and that's their markings. Yeah, they'll dive they can go under for about 90 seconds, and they'll come up very far away. I just happened to look out there. They keep going. Yeah. So she went with me, insisted on coming. She had her first swim, and then she got so tired, but she didn't want it, so she took my hat and curled up under that and took her nap. So this is the new replacement as we went home, right? Next. Oh, is that it? Okay, damage. Okay. No more?
In that folder.
Where's the dog when you're here?
Yeah. Next one's gonna come up, huh? Oh, is that it? Okay. I guess that's all.
Where's the puppy now?
Puppy's still up in Maine. We'll stay up there for the rest of the summer and then go back. But I'll tell you, just in terms of things that happen up there, because people come up and they are saturated at the sixth census, when you get up there, the decompression starts to happen because there really is no electricity. So one of the experiences I had this time was when the kids came up out of the New York and Washington DC area, they come with all their devices, and within 2 or 3 days all the batteries drain and then there's nothing to do. And then they go into a little bit of withdrawal. Now we're talking 5, 6, 7 years old already, they're withdrawing from these things. It's always interesting to see what happens, but the niece whose cabin is next to me is much older than them. And even though she's been coming up, she's now installed a router to get reception, right? And and the router has this antenna that goes, you have to put it in one special place where only a signal can come in. But the puppy thinks that this is a toy. So the puppy goes out, finds this thing, and then buries it. And you can hear this howling from her cabin. I just lost my reception! So the interesting story I want to tell you is, so we're up there, the kids are all there, and they finally had their first night without their devices, and they're going off to their bedrooms, and then I hear one little girl say, Unky, Unky, come on out, come on out. I said, what? She said, come on, really weird. I said, what? Look it! And it was the stars. And because she was in the New York area, and because of the light thing, she'd not seen stars at night. What are those? So I said, well, started to explain. I'm a humanist, so explaining stars is like, well, those are all little, things out there. And like, whoa! And at that point, the puppy buried the router device again. And so my niece is screaming, how can you get anything done up here? And then they said, well, Auntie, come out and look at the stars. She goes, ah! So you see the tensions already across generations. But the kids had never seen that before, and they were awestruck by seeing the stars. How far away are they? Why are they so small? They're actually bigger than us. And you could just see them. So every night they went out and made it a part of their routine to look at the stars and say goodnight to the stars. This is what they did. And the other thing that happened along this is we said, well, the water's good, but there's a spring we can go to. What's a spring? Well, we can get water. So we went to the spring, and some people had brought their kids, paddled in from, a camp. They were from Massachusetts, and they were all just sitting there watching. And we took the jug, and we were getting water out of the spring. It just comes right out of the side of the hill. And the kids from Massachusetts going, oh my God. What? Well, it's water. Yeah, but it's like coming out of the ground. Yeah. Well, that's weird. I've never seen that before. Can you drink it? And they had never seen water in a natural. They said, well, where's the turnoff? There is no turnoff. Well, who do you pay? You don't pay anybody. I mean, they went through this kind of shock of being there. And the last thing, I'll close with this, is after she saw the stars for the first night, and I took her back to her cabin to say goodnight, she said, will that be on again tomorrow night?
There's a rerun tomorrow.
There's a rerun. Will that be on again tomorrow night? So again, you can see the text here I was using was saying, getting in touch with our natures can sometimes seem that strange as water and stars as it is to these kids. But the meditation is another way of resetting to a more natural. So we'll continue next week with the text. We'll be meeting Thursday to translate again, and we'll just keep going along in this fashion. Any closing questions, comments? Sorry to bore you with my summer vacation,
No,
but I only do that once and it's done.
I have a question.
Yes.
You said when you started talking that when we go into meditation, we go into the depths of our mind, but not the mind. And
Right.
that seems a little in contradiction to delving to the level of the, say, in Jungian terms, the collective unconscious. Is there no point of penetration to that deeper level?
They're non-dual. So let me say that again. They're not two. They're one. But they are also, in a sense, split. And so there's no way to get to what we call the Buddha mind except through this mind. Why I made that distinction was to say you can't get to that ground except the ground that's on your feet right now, which is your own state of mind. Does your own state of mind eventually open to that, it can, and probably will, if you keep at it. But they're not the same to begin with because we've made this artificial divorce. So fundamentally they're not two, but we've grown distant. So we think the enlightened Buddha mind is something out there, and this mind is something else. But ironically, they're one and the same. This is not a misuse, I don't want to say, it's a inadequate or incomplete use of that. There's a wonderful quote from the Avatamsaka Sutra. It says, truth and falseness, true and false, interlink and mingle. Within the ordinary mind, you find the Buddha mind. In other words, although that Buddha mind is the fundamental mind, but our state that we're starting with can only be the mind that we have right now in front of us, available to us. So the emphasis is by paying attention and cultivating that, it eventually releases and opens to its full potential, which is the Buddha mind. That's why I made a kind of distinction. So it's a good question. But a lot of people, when they come, think that they want to get Buddha, they want to get enlightenment, they want to get the profound, and they miss the ground right under the feet, which is the only way to get it, is by cultivating the ground right under one's feet. So by putting, as he does, the emphasis on your mind, here and now, what's going on, only then do you start to be able to work with its functioning, its expansion, its use, until gradually it frees itself up to become that full capacity. Okay?
Yeah.
Good question. All right. Wow. Time's going. Anything else? Announcements? Nothing.
There will be the usual Saturday lunch this Saturday tomorrow. We will have the ceremony at 9, and then we close our doors, and then we open again at 5:15 in the evening.
Because people are still on retreat?
Well, I'm still in Vancouver, some are still in SADB for the retreat.
So a large contingent of people from here went to monasteries and temples up in Seattle and Vancouver to open them. And then there's a retreat still going on at the City of 10,000 Buddhas that ends this weekend, I think. So normally we have more people here. Okay, so tomorrow night there's an Avatamsaka lecture here. Anything else going on during the week?
Yeah, on Mondays we'll have the integrating yoga and qigong, like always 7:30 to 9.
Here, 7:30 to 9, so yoga and qigong. And then Friday night, Saturday night, and there's things going on, but check the schedule. If you're not on the email list yet, who do you talk to get on the list? There's actually a person there. Is that a she? No. Alex.
The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, the wizard behind the scene.
Yeah,
Okay.
So people emailed me, so I can pass on to the master. So she sent out the monthly updates for the events.
Okay, good. All right, so this is the format. Those of you who want, next Friday we'll see you again, and we'll start some basic. Yes?
Are you lecturing tomorrow?
Am I lecturing tomorrow? To my little niece, yes. She's coming over. We're going to do a transference now in English.
Share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may their minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise.
3 vows to the Buddha. Bowing respect to the Triple Jewel.